Hello and welcome to Together We Connect. Today I always say I'm very excited for whoever comes onto my show, but today I'm really excited because today we're going to discuss something very real and that is close to my heart. I've got here Ian today, and before Ian introduces himself and tells us his story, today we're going to look into how we all have these safety nets in life. We all maybe a bit ashamed in certain moments in our lives, and it's quite scary to be real and be true to ourselves and to be able to get out there. These are quite a lot of points, but the main theme we're going to be discussing today, how we can embrace change and how it can be quite empowering to start living today. So without further ado, I've got Ian here, who is a life coach. Ian, over to you. Tell me about your story, a bit about your background and who you are.
Tova, thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I feel very humbled, and I've been looking forward to this. I know we've been discussing this for a while, and it's very exciting to actually be sitting down and having this conversation. And as you said, it's a very important conversation. And before I actually tell you a little bit about my story, I'm delighted that you've actually gone on this journey of sharing this information with so many people and giving them the courage and the hope. So great stuff, and well done on all of this. So a little bit of my background. Well, as you mentioned, I am a life coach, but it's not something that I've always done. And I actually became a life coach through two things. And I always say that usually in life there's a conscious decision to do something, and then there's circumstance which causes you or results in you having to make a change. And my journey of becoming a life coach was influenced by both of those.
Right. Wow.
So I spent 25 years, believe it or not, as a banker. I was in a financial role. Never ever thought that I would be sitting here talking to you as a coach. If you had to say to me, Ian, one day...
It's quite funny because actually I remember picking up the call to call you and ask your advice about, it was when you help around Zoom.
Yes.
And I knew you as a guy to help around Zoom and digital because I'm an event coordinator. And it was really funny when I picked up the phone. I said, "Hey Ian, that profile photo, what's the name of your company?"
So it's On the Edge. On the Edge Blocks for Business.
Right, and I asked, "What is that?" And you said, "Well," and then you started telling me that actually you're a life coach. So going along that, so you're in the financial sector for 25 years?
25 years. I was in the financial sector for 25 years, and I thought that's where I'd probably retire. I thought that was...
like from financial to being a life coach.
Yeah.
Please tell us how you got to that journey and how you had the kind of courage to get out there, because that can be quite scary.
Absolutely, Tova, and I think that it was scary. It's not something that was a magic wand and everything was laid out and perfect. It's been it's been a thrilling journey, but it's also been very daunting.
What was the sudden change then?
So the sudden change for me was really a circumstance in my life that resulted in me actually not having a choice, really. And why I say not having a choice is because my family circumstances changed. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019. And thank God, just because I know people, like, it distracts people and they get all worried, I'd like to just tell everyone that she is, thank God, well, and it's been... Yes, we're very grateful and blessed for that. But I think it's something that really rocks your world. And it rocks your world in a way that sometimes you end up doing things that you never believed you could do because you're forced to do these things. And one of the things I was forced to do was to change my entire life. And from being somebody who was in this rigid world of financial services and banking, which had very little emotion and very little little elements of what I do today.
It's different parts of the brain.
Absolutely. And it was parts of the brain that I'd never really tapped into. But here I was in a situation which required me to reframe.
Blown away, someone from being in quite a rigid field to open up, that is just quite scary. And you're saying, well, it was kind of through an unfortunate case that what your family went through. So how, because it must have been really dark times. So what, with those dark times and those times of uncertainty, was that when you kind of found yourself, or how did that come about?
So Tova, the interesting thing, and maybe just to, before I talk about the dark times and talk about the challenging times, is maybe just to share something which I felt was very important in terms of how we deal with tragedy, how we deal with things that are tragic, things that are shocking in a way, is that we all have this ability to make a choice. You make a choice, and I think when we found out that my wife had been diagnosed with cancer, I honestly believe that in that moment we had two very distinct choices, and we had a split second to choose how we were going to deal with it. And we chose positivity. We chose an opportunity. And I know that many of the audience and people listening in or watching the video will go like, that's crazy. And yes, it is crazy to think about it, but it's a conscious choice you make. Because if you don't, then those dark moments, like you mentioned, will consume and will pull you down. So the reason I had to mention it was contextual in the sense that we did have dark times, but because our attitude and our approach was one of positivity and one of saying, well, we have the situation.
You kind of accepted it.
We accepted it. We didn't push back on it and say, well, take it away. Just this. We didn't want this. We didn't sit and go, wow. We said, okay, we've got it. We got to deal with it. So that when we did have the dark times, which I know was your question, we were able to deal with those far easier because we kept going back, looking at the positive. And I think that for me was one of the biggest lessons about reframing how we look at life.
So you're saying it's about our attitudes and our perspective and the way we look at things, and it's okay to have those moments of when it's not okay, but it's like you can't just carry on living negative. You actually have to kind of accept the moments. And I feel like you guys had this incredible inner strength to be like, hey, this is the situation. Yeah, it's a bit terrible. There's a lot of other words I would have used right now. But it's amazing how you, through going through what you did with your family, you kind of reflected within yourself, and it landed up, you kind of changed gears and went into like a new career. So by stepping out of yourself and finding a new pathway, was that not a bit scary? Or like, how did you know that, hey, let's leave the financial sector and try something new?
The honest answer to that was through a very tough conversation. And the tough conversation was with myself. And I recall this vividly because it was very much a crossroads that I found myself at. I can't really say for any particular reason, but the time just arrived where I had to make a conscious decision, because I was almost moonlighting in a way. And then the way I say I was moonlighting, I was kind of like going, well, I am trying to hold on to my past, and my past was the financial services industry.
Right.
But at the same time,
which you know so well.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely. It was very much a comfort zone.
Right.
It also helped me when things were emotionally challenging. I could almost check out and go back to that place of safety and say, well, I didn't really have to worry about the here and now that I was dealing with. But what I found, Tove, is that the more I kept trying to go back into that place, the more I was losing connection with it. It's because I wasn't involved in it day to day, and I was focused on my family, and I was focused on my wife getting better, and I was focused on really seeing life differently because our circumstances were different. I was losing touch with the financial services industry. And I had to turn around and say, you know what? You can't keep hoping that things will go back to normal when you know deep down inside they're not. And I was like kind of expecting that at some point my wife would get better, I would go back into financial services, and it would be exactly as it was. And I realized that at that point it can't be. And the reason why it couldn't be was because I had put myself into a situation where I had to make a decision. And that was the hardest conversation I've had, is because I had to let go of something which I knew, I felt comfortable in.
Do you see that's a lot of kind of self-questioning?
I did. It was a lot of self-questioning.
It's quite scary because we are our own critics.
Yes.
You know, like we really are hard on ourselves. But I think within this area it's actually quite beneficial. By you asking yourself, like, I want to reel here. Can I really go back to something normal? You know?
Yeah.
And can you give us advice now that you've had that change and you've kind of crossed that barrier? What advice can you give us around that?
So I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give anyone who is really contemplating their own futures is remember, this is your future. Don't live somebody else's expectations.
I love that.
I'm glad. Because I think it's something that we almost need to reinforce on a constant basis, is that nobody lives our lives for us except ourselves. Yet we spend so much time worrying about what other people think about what we're doing, how successful we are. We measure ourselves against other people's expectations, and that's ridiculous. I know that it's what we all do. I did it, so I'm first to kind of
as well, like,
we all do. And the question you ask is, what can you do? Is to accept that this is your life.
Right.
You know, you are the one who is responsible for the decisions that you make. When you make those decisions, you are accountable for those.
Yes.
And as scary as that might seem, we do it every day. Yet what we do is we kind of feel comfortable when we pass it on to someone else and ask somebody else, what do you think? Like, or am I living up to your expectations? And they go, yes, and we feel good about it. Or they say no, and we go, okay, well, what do I need to do to change?
Right.
Because then what we do is we actually take the easy way out. We then say, well, I don't have to hold myself accountable.
Right.
I'm outsourcing it in a way.
Yes.
So,
I think the responsibility, like, we're pushing onto other people, like,
yes.
we're not allowing ourselves to be accountable for our actions. And because it's so scary being accountable for one's own action, to put yourself out there, it's like, gee, actually, I should be my own competition, like, not looking at other people. So there's this kind of brilliant idea that I saw through the company Yes Theory. This guy, Tom Judovich, a leading psychologist, interviewed various people on their deathbeds in America, and he asked them one question. He asked them, what's the one thing you may regret? Like the one thing you may have regretted in your life. And 76% of people answered, not living my ideal life. Do you think with the education system we should be focusing on our children's strengths rather than pushing them into a career that isn't well suited for them.
Tova, that's probably one of my most passionate areas is about freedom of choice. And as you alluded to, how do we allow people to be successful without pushing them in the direction we want them to go? And that's difficult because when you talk about it from a parent's perspective, we want the best for our children. But in many cases, we don't know what is best for our kids. And what we do is we tend to then look at what broader society is doing. And then what we do is we push them into the pigeonholes that we think is going to be the best for them. And that's why I say it's a very difficult situation to be in. But having said that, it's equally counterproductive if you push your child along a path that is going to be more destructive to their long-term success rather than taking the road less traveled and having a bit of courage now to say, well, you know what, we're going to go on this journey together. We don't really know what the outcome will be, but we're going to be curious and we're going to make it exciting. That is awesome, but it takes a lot of commitment and it takes a lot of support. So what I'm saying is that you spoke earlier a little bit about how we are our biggest self-critics. We are our biggest, we lack the confidence, we lack all of that stuff. And that's because along our journeys of conditioning, we've been set up to fail. Because in some areas, we've gone down paths which didn't really suit us. Inevitably, if that's not the path of success, or if that's not the path of strength, you're going to fail. Failure doesn't lead to confidence.
There's a very interesting, I think it's either an image or quote on Google, where you have these different animals lined up and you have a teacher in front and you have a fish and the fish is like, I can't climb up that tree.
Yes.
And it's just amazing how us as humans, we're going a bit off topic, but us as humans, how we're all so different, but yet we're put into the same education system and we get tested exactly the same. So I know for myself, and I think I speak for a lot of people, that I sucked at tests, but if a teacher would have looked at my strengths and looked at what I was good at and rather worked with that, then at least that would have helped, myself being pulled through the system rather than looking at our weaknesses. So that leads me on to my next section, where I think life coaching is so vital to have even within schools and adults or any ages to have those skills. So can you tell us a bit about coaching and what value it offers us?
Okay, so I think the thing that, and to answer your question, the thing that drew me towards coaching was it really emphasizes the focus on the other person. And what I mean by that is, as a coach, it's not about me being successful. It's not, and reframing success was probably one of the most challenging things I had to do in my transformation from being somebody in the financial sector that was measured on success and outputs and targets and all of that. I had to change my point of view that my success was not going to be what I did. It was actually going to be what the other person in the room, being the person I'm coaching, would succeed at. So
that's quite empowering. Okay?
It's hugely empowering.
See another human grow.
Absolutely, and that for me is you've hit it on the head. Is the whole purpose of being a coach is to help the other person become the best version of themselves. And what I mean by become the best version of themselves is not to become another me or another person that we compare them to. We don't bring a post in the room and say, this is what you're going to become. we say, and I think you alluded to it earlier, Tova, was it's about who you're competing with.
Right.
And you're helping the individual to be better today than they were yesterday. And that for me is really fundamental about what the emphasis on coaching is.
Right.
Now, that's the last side of it. And when I say it's the last side of it, is because in life, everything comes with positive, but it also comes with an element of negative and tough parts. In order to become the best version of yourself.
Let's be honest, it's by default, it's more negative.
You know, we could argue that. I think it is. I think it can be negative, but I think it's how you approach it.
Sure, no, but
Yeah.
that's the whole, I think, why life coaching helps so much.
Yeah, it is. And we often look at the negatives and we say, well, the negatives just seem so insurmountable that the positives is not really worth it, because it's like a mountain. If you don't look at how far you've climbed up the mountain and you just keep looking at how much further you need to go, it's always going to be difficult. But whereas if you reflect on, wow, I look down and I've actually achieved, then it's reframing how you look at your success and your goals. But I think where the hard part and where the challenge comes within coaching is that in order to be the best version of yourself, there needs to be an acknowledgement that you need to change. And change is uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
And equally, change can be very personal. It can be very uncomfortable. And it can be very uncomfortable because it's acknowledgement that we are not perfect. And it's an acceptance that there are certain things that we've done in life that have not always been good for us, that have not always been in our best interests. And not only having to unlearn those and to almost retrain our brain, we also need to deal with it in an area of not being hard on ourselves, because you said we are our own worst critic, but you can't be too harsh on yourself and say, well, I'm such a bad person because I lived 25 years of my life in corporate, whereas I should have been a coach. I can't look at life like that. It's because...
But that also is, like, as if you did do it earlier, you might not, that's not the path you're meant to go on.
Well, absolutely.
This is the time in your life where it was meant to be.
And that for me is one of the aspects of coaching which I find so fulfilling, is that we don't focus on the past so much. We don't go and analyze a situation. We may deal with it in the context of saying, well, let's just look at how you would have dealt with that situation then compared to how you deal with it now, because it's demonstrating growth. But we don't go there and say, well, you know, I should have done this and I should have done that, because to your point, Tova, is that at that point in time, with the information and the situation we're in, we made the best decision we could. What we're doing now is we're equipping that every time, because going forward in our lives, we're going to be confronted with these situations.
Yes.
The intention is that when you're confronted with a situation, is you use all your skills, you use your own inner confidence through your self-awareness to make decisions in your best interests.
So we're going deeper, hey?
We are, and we are, and I think the importance is that you need to go deep, and the reason why you need to go deep is because if you allow it to just like scrape the top of the just scrape the icing on the cake, what it'll be is you'll kind of just feel like, okay, cool, I've dealt with that, now I'm going to be a different person. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that, and that's why coaching is a journey. It's not like have one chat and then
it's a lifelong journey.
It's a lifelong journey, and it's a lifelong journey that, like gym, it's like training, you know, and that's why I always try and bring the analogy of a coach to training. You've got to keep training. Yeah, if you want to keep your body healthy, you want to keep fit.
Because that was my next question. As a life coach, why do you think we like to stay within our safety nets? You know,
because it's easy, and I think because being comfortable is less daunting. We don't have to take risks. We kind of we're comfortable with the boundaries. And I think that's what we typically gravitate towards.
Right.
And the thing is that the minute you step out of your comfort zone, that's when things become exciting. That's when things feel different. And that's where things also feel very scary. And what happens is, as you said earlier, because we typically focus on the negative, and you alluded to courage and fear at the beginning, is that our fear overwhelms us and stops us from taking that leap. It says to us, don't go there, it's going to be uncomfortable, you're not going to like it, so just stay in your comfort zone. Even though you know that you're curious, you're inquisitive, something feels like you should, something inside your head is going, I've got to do something different. Think about your journey.
Yeah.
You've been pushed to do something, but somehow something holds you back, or something pulls you back. And it's identifying why you're being pulled back, and dealing with that and saying, to your point, why do we get pulled back into our safety nets?
Right.
Is it because we are worried what everyone else is going to think?
I think so. 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, from a personal experience, which I haven't really spoken about before, but just a bit of a glimpse of it is that, like, I was always very ashamed to tell people that I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic, and probably let's throw ADD in there while we're at it. I would do anything to, like, hide away from that person, and I always thought I was kind of ashamed about, that's what I was ashamed about. I always thought it was about dyslexia and dyspraxia. I always thought when I applied for a new high school, college, varsity, when I went for a job, I would hide I'm dyslexic because I didn't want them to know my spelling wasn't good, and they would think I'm stupid and have all these like wrong ideas about who I was. But then when I started looking within myself, and I realized it's a lot more about that. It's not just that I'm scared about people knowing that I can't spell. It was like a fear that actually had taken over my whole life. I wasn't achieving or living my own life. And until, as you said, I think I can relate to what you're saying, until you accept and acknowledge where you are at and who you are, you can't move on. And I had to really look within myself and realize that it's not to be on a chat show or to be an event coordinator, I don't have to be the best speller.
Yes.
So I think that's where we have to be real. And when I kind of had that spark of, I've got to be vulnerable, I've got to be out there, and hey, I sent emails out the whole time, and yes, I do mix things up, but that's okay, that's life, that's just who I am. And the minute I got over that, it was like, Ian, freedom.
Absolutely.
It felt amazing. So it was so nice to kind of conquer that safety net and start living my life today. So Ian, as a coach, what qualities do you bring to your clients?
So I think one of the most important aspects for me is really about being non-judgmental, and for me that is critical.
Right.
And what I mean about it, just to unpack it a little bit, what I mean by being non-judgmental is that my role as a coach is not to give advice. And I know that sounds extremely difficult, it's like difficult to maybe comprehend, but it's very important because, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, I don't have to live the person's life that I'm trying to help.
Right.
So for me to give advice that I am not accountable or responsible for is very, very judgmental. And for me, it also means that I have to be open and very aware of what the person I'm coaching wants to achieve in their life. Right. And I have to accept that, because
not to project your own
absolutely
thoughts and feelings.
Absolutely.
Right. That's quite hard.
It's very, very hard. And I tell you, our default mind when we help people is to give suggestions, to give advice. And I honestly think, Tova, that people do things with the best intentions.
100%.
And I'm not saying that we should like ignore people that share their advice. I think advice is very valuable in the sense that it opens your mind, it gives you something to think about. But I think the most important thing that everyone needs to understand is you don't have to act on every piece of advice that you get. You can take different pieces of advice and make a decision and say, well, I listened to Ian, I listened to that one, I listened to that one, and I'm going to take out of that what I believe is right. And that's why advice is important, because it may not help you now, but it might bring context in your life at a later stage. But going back to what are the ideals about being a coach, it's about being positive.
Right.
It's about being positive in the context of saying that if a person feels that life is always a pain, life is always a burden, is to work with that person to change perspective and to see the positive. And I'm really a believer that we compound our problems, we make them bigger than they really are, because of what we focus on. And focusing on positivity, focusing on light, focusing on things that uplift us.
Proactive.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then what it does is it empowers us, gives us the strength to deal with the negativity. It helps us to put it into context. And I think the other thing is trust. You know, the one thing is that as a coach, the most important thing is to allow the person to confide and be vulnerable without the fear of like what's going to happen. You know, like, oh my God, if I tell Ian this, or if I share this with Ian, what's going to happen? It's that trust that whatever you tell me is told in confidence, first of all, and secondly is I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to understand why does that worry you. And for me, I guess the thing that ties all of those up and helps me to be a coach is to go into every conversation curious. And why I say go into every conversation curious is because I'm less worried about the issue that the person is feeling or the issue that the person is telling me. I'm more interested in why that issue bothers the person so much. Because the thing for me is, if we can understand what is causing that discomfort or what is causing the fear itself may actually not be the problem. It may be something that happened in an instance, like something happens to us in our lives and we remember that for the rest of our lives, good or bad.
Yes.
And if we don't deal with that, if we don't tackle that and say, well, you know what, I'm going to make a decision and I know that I've looked at every scenario and let me give you a quick practical example. If you know, for example, you're going to have to deal with a situation or a person or a circumstance where you know the situation is going to be difficult.
Right.
Say you're going to walk into a room and there's going to be a difficult person in the room. Is there any point in convincing yourself that that person is not going to be difficult that day? No, because there's no, you don't have control over that.
Yeah.
So the thing is that is it practical to try and avoid that person for the rest of your life? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Because that person may be the gateway, or they may be part of you getting to become the best version of yourself. So that's not practical.
Right.
So the only thing, and those things are not in your control. So why do you spend so much time? And so many of us will have sleepless nights and going, oh my gosh, how am I going to walk into this room and confront this person? How am I going to do this? Or maybe, and then we go, well, maybe they won't be there. Or maybe they'll be nice. Or maybe they won't see me in the room. You come up with crazy things. Instead of doing that, why don't we rather say, well, I know the person's going to be there. And I know that they're going to be difficult. So why should I walk in there surprised?
So you're saying take control.
Take control.
Be captain.
Absolutely. Go in there fully aware. That doesn't mean that the situation is going to be difficult. What it means though is it means that you're going in there
one step ahead.
You're going in there and you go like, I know this person's going to be difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand up to the person, and I'm going to do whatever I need to, not to let that person get to me. And rather focus on what effort or what areas do you need to work on to walk in there to feel confident. Not to worry about that, rather than to deflect away from it. And that for me is the importance of how we spend our time.
Correct. Yeah. So, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Time is ticking, but I did want to end off with this last question, which I think is very important. Is your change of pathways has totally been inspiring and very motivational to hear. So, thank you for being
You're
here.
so welcome.
But what advice would you give someone who is thirsty for change, but has so much fear and is so scared to get out there, but wants to let go?
Okay. So, first and foremost, I would say it's never too late. So never look and go, I can't do this because I'm too old, or don't make excuses. And that's maybe the point. Is like we always jump and look for the reasons why we can't do something. So rather accept that if you want to change, you can change. But it's going to be difficult. As I just said in the last example, don't just lie to yourself and say, well, I'm going to change, but I'm going to carry on doing everything. Because, there's a wonderful saying that says, if I don't know who it's attributed to, so I'm not going to try and misquote it, but it says, if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, you're going to go insane. Right. And the thing is, if you're going to change, if you're going to say, I'm going to change, but you don't do anything differently, then you're going to be disappointed. So if you say, I want to make a change in my life, make a conscious decision that you are going to change. It's going to be uncomfortable, but look at it as discomfort in a growth. It's like growing pains. You're growing because you're growing up to get better. It's not like you getting uncomfortable because you're falling down. You're actually growing.
The more the sweat, and it's very uncomfortable, and yet, yes, it is a lot of pain and it's a lot of hard work to reach that goal, but at the end of the day, like every little pigeon step you take forward, you're making a difference to your future self, and that's quite powerful. And Ian, thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
I wish you so much success in what you're doing and your new path, and everything you said today is kind of you're your own role model.
Yes.
And I know you're my role model today, because just to embrace change, and your example really shows embracing change and looking positively and having a positive outlook towards the future. If people want to reach you, how should they get hold of you?
So the best place, so thank you Tova, thanks for the opportunity, and I'm humbled and I'm really proud that I've had such an impact on you. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, as I say, I'm widely available on Facebook, LinkedIn. Best place is just to look at me on Twitter at ianbess. I'm sure Tova will put this with the stream. You can put my details there, or just reach out to Tova, and Tova, you can put people in contact with 100%. Me. But I think it's a collective journey, and I think the more people that we can have these conversations with, the more valuable it will be for everyone out there. So thank you for.
So if you can end up with one quote, what
Sure.
would be your favorite quote?
I think my favorite quote is something that I learned when I was stuck, and I think we all get stuck at some point in life.
Yeah,
and the quote went like this. It was, sometimes in life you have to give up good things to get better things. And what that meant for me was that in life we could almost create an environment where we feel good. We feel that everything's fine, and that keeps us in our comfort zone. We convince ourselves. But things don't have to get to a situation like mine where it was a horrible or a circumstance that forced me to make a change. We can aspire to do better, and that's why in life, be courageous to give up good things, knowing that you're striving towards better things.